Hi everyone, my name is Mark Moykins from Big Mountain Studio, and this video is a continuation from where I showed you a new way to create a modal pop-up using the scene dock on a view controller. So if you haven't seen that one, then I'll include a link below and you can see that one first, and then come back to this video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to prevent the table view rows from being selected, and then we'll also add some animation to the pop-up to give it some bounce when it shows. Then we'll also go over how to use animation when closing the pop-up too. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so the way to fix that is back on our storyboard. And let me show you something here. So we have the table view selected, and you would think that maybe there would be a property on the table view that would allow you to select cells but not show the highlight. And there's this property here called selection. And I made this mistake first too, where you go in here and you say, oh, no selection, I don't want it to be selected. Well, that's not the same thing. If you change it to no selection, that means when you click on the row, nothing happens. We just added a function, did select row at, for our table view. And if you change this to no selection, that event never even gets fired. It never even reaches that function. So that's not the answer. Instead, what you want to do is come into your prototype cell. And there's a property on there called selection. And this is really strange. By default, it's set to blue. And I don't know if that's some old property, but Apple ignores it now. Because as you saw, when we selected a row, it actually changed to gray. So I'm not sure what the history is behind this blue. But what we want to do is just change it to none. And that gives us the desired effect, where it doesn't even highlight the row. So if we go in and we take a look, okay, that gives us the desired effect. You see, it doesn't even select it anymore, right? So that is perfect. That's exactly what we want. Okay, now there's one last thing I want to do. When this comes up, I don't know if you've seen my other video before on the 5 tips for backgrounds, but you want to kind of bring the user's attention on what it is you're displaying. And so it seems like this background right here kind of competes for the attention of this pop-up. So what we want to do is we kind of want to dim this out a little bit so it doesn't attract so much attention and the user's attention focuses just on this pop-up. What I'm going to do is when you select it, I want to show another kind of like overlay behind the pop-up. And we're not going to do that in here because this pop-up is too small. Instead, what we want to do is lay something over this entire view right here. All right, so let's do that. Let's go in here, and I'm just going to use a regular UI view. And we're going to put it over everything. And we'll just give it a color, like maybe let's just do black. And I'm going to change the opacity here. So you can still see behind it a little bit, but not as much. It kind of like it dims things out a little bit, like that. And you have a couple of different options here too. I'm just choosing a UI view with a black color that you can see through a little bit, but you can also use a blur control. That'll work perfectly as well. Okay, now we need to create an outlet for this. So let's go ahead and grab this view and we'll stick it up here. I don't want to mix it with the info screen here. And I'll just call this like a dim view because it dims out the screen behind it. And then when I show it down here, I'll add it right here. Right before we add the sub view, I'll dim the screen. And now, nothing I told you about too is that we were going to animate the screen. So I think the dim view would look better if it was animated from 0 to, what do we set it at? Oh yeah, you know what? Now let's not animate it that way. Let's do this. I changed my mind. Let's just make it black. Okay, it's completely black. And instead what we'll do is we'll change the alpha property because we can animate that easily. And let's go with a 0.8. Okay, so that 0.8 is what I want it to arrive at. And by default, it's going to be 0. So they can, when they come into the view, they can see everything. So let's work on our animation a bit here. So let's create some room for ourselves here. Let's create some working space. We can stop that. Okay, so I'm going to put the animation right here. And you guys are probably super familiar, if you watch my videos, you're super familiar with how to start an animation, right? It's just UI-view.animate. You probably had that memorized by now from watching all my videos. And this is the one I want to use. I wanted to use the springWithDamping. And if you need some more information on how this animation works, the springWithDamping, I'll link another video where I go into it in a lot of detail. So for now, how long do we want this animation to last? Let's go with the default 0.3 seconds. That's a duration that Apple uses for many of its animations. I'm not going to delay it. The springWithDamping, one is it completely damps out all the spring, so it just makes it into a normal animation. So I don't know why you'd ever use one for this property. And 0 means there's no damping. It means there's tons of spring. What I like to do is kind of start right in the middle and then see how it looks. Add more damping or take away more damping to make it more springy. Initial velocity, Apple recommends 0 for most animations, so that's what I'm going to do. For options, I don't think I need any options on this one. And here is my animation. Okay, so one of the things I want to do is I want to show that dimmer, right? That dim screen. So we just say self.dimView. And I'm going to change the alpha up to, let's see, we had it at 0.8, right? And for completion, I don't think we need to do anything here. So I'm just going to delete that for now. Okay, good. And I didn't know you could delete that. I thought you had to keep that in, but it's optional. And one of my viewers named Dima, he's from the Ukraine, he taught me this, that you can delete. If it's optional, you can just delete it. So thank you, Dima, for that tip. Okay, what else do we have to do? Okay, the second thing we want to do is we want to be able to give that view some bounce, right? So before I add it to the subview, I'm going to change its dimensions a little bit. I'm going to warp this info view by transforming it. And here's how you do that. We use the transform property. And the transforms, there's basically 3 main transforms that you use in iOS. It's a math term. You can apply a transform by scaling it, and that means making it bigger or smaller. You can apply a rotation transform, or you can apply a translation transform, which basically means repositioning it from one place to another place. And so what we want to do is we want to apply a scaling transform to it. And I'm going to use CG-affine transform. And we're going to scale it. And if you want to know more about CG-affine transform, I have a couple of other videos where I go into more detail on what exactly that means. CG is basically core graphics, and affine basically means it preserves parallel relationships. So when we do one of these 3 transforms, we're not warping the image or skewing it. We're keeping the same parallel relationships. And transform is basically where we're changing how it looks or where the position is. Okay, so let's do this. When we come in here, we're going to make it a little bit less wide by changing the scale of the X to 0.8. So it's going to make it a little bit more narrow. And for the Y, we're actually going to make it a little bit taller. So the way the scaling works is if I keep these values at 1, it's going to just maintain the same size. So if scale X and Y were 1 and 1, it's the same size. So anything less than 1 is smaller, and anything more than 1 will make it bigger. So here, we're kind of stretching out that view. And the reason why we want to do that is because in our animation, we're going to have it go back to its original form, but because we're using a spring, it's going to bounce back to its original form. And this is a technique that I kind of like, I give it my own name. This is what I call the windup technique, where basically you set up all your controls by warping them or putting them in different places, and then you animate them all back to their original form. And you do it this way. InfoView dot, we have to use self in here. self.infoView.transform. Now when we want to set something back to its original shape or placement or rotation, we just say .identity, like that. And that will reset everything back to the way it was before we started transforming it. And not only that, so when it goes back to its original form, it's going to animate it back to its original form. And because we're using a spring, it's going to bounce it back to its original form. So that's basically how it works. All right, let's see how that looks. Yeah, see that? See how it kind of bounced into place? That's because when we first created it, or when we set the first transform on it here, we made it narrow and we made it taller, and then it bounces back to its original form. So when I close it, I need to be able to remove this dim view here too. So let's do that. And let's animate that. UIView.animate. Oh, whoops. I chose the spring with damping. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, we can do that. No delay. Initial damping, I start in the middle, 0.5. No velocity. We don't need any options. And one of the things that we're going to do, now of course this spring isn't going to have any effect when I get rid of the dim view. I'm just changing the alpha back to 0. But what we can do here is we can add some cool effects to making this info view go away too. Yeah, let's do this. When we get rid of it, let's kind of like start to make the view smaller and then go away. So we can say, yeah, okay, here we go. We say info view, and we'll transform it, and we're just going to use the scale to make it smaller. Right here, scale it. And let's see, let's make it like half as wide, and we'll give it the effect that it's collapsing on itself more, kind of like getting shorter. And after it's done, oh, I need the self in here, don't I? I keep forgetting to do that. And then after it's done, we'll say if it was successful, then we'll remove it. So we'll animate it down and then remove it. Like that. And I need the self. Okay, it's got the nice bounce, and then if I close it, yeah, you see how it kind of like it collapses and then disappears. Yeah, that's fine. I think I'll make it smaller though. We'll just go down to 2 and 2. Yeah, that's fine. That was cool. All right, guys. I think that just about covers it. Now, in my other app too, I think you noticed something else. Like it has a loading screen. And this video is already going too long, so I'm not going to create that loading screen. If you guys are interested in how that loading screen works, you notice there's a different animation on it. Here, let me show you. This might actually be a good project for you guys to try on your own. Is add that loading screen like that, and then you notice there's kind of like an animation of a white line that kind of goes up. So see if you can figure that out. But if you guys want me to create a video and show you guys how I did that, then feel free to ask me about that too. And I think we have everything working the same way. Oh, you see how this has rounded corners? Let me just show you how to do that real quick. In my project, I have this designable X, and that's another thing. I have a UI view, which also has rounded corners on it as well, corner radius. So that'll expose this corner radius property for me if I use that. So let me use that. Okay, so we had the UI view selected. Yeah, there it is right there. And let's change that class. Let's create a custom class. We use UI view. And if we come here, you'll see all these more properties here. So let's give it a corner radius. I don't know what it was. I think it was maybe like a 20. And we also have to do something else. Okay, click bounce. Okay, that's fine. All right, let's see how that looks. Yeah, there you go. All right, it looks cool. All right, see how easy that is? I really recommend creating your own library, or you can even use my library and extend it. I have the basic things that I use. You might have more ideas of things that you can add. I'll include a link to my GitHub account for this Designable X, and then you guys can play around with it if you want. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned a new way on how to create modal pop-ups by using the scene dock in the storyboard. It's really fun to use, and you can just, if you're not designing it, you can just collapse it, and then if you want to go back and do some more work, you can just open it back up again. It's a great way to add additional views that you don't always need to show. You can also use the scene dock to create custom message pop-ups instead of using Apple's default pop-ups. And I showed you a little bit about animation and how to make it more interesting when it pops up. So if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Consider sharing it with your friends or on your social media. And also consider subscribing. And leave me a message too. If you want me to show you a video on how to create that loading screen, let me know, and I'll easily create it for you. But I think it'll be a good exercise for you guys to try it. It is basically another pop-up just like this, where I added a UI view to the scene dock, I added an image to it, and I gave it rounded corners. And I think the animation I had on it was when the application started, it showed, and then when I finished getting the data, I moved it out from the view controller up through the top. So see if you can figure that out by using what I taught you here today. All right, thanks guys.